"Make love to me every day and you will never suffer again," whispered the Apache who owned her. She had grown up in a small village surrounded by hills and rivers, where life was simple, and every day had a rhythm that made people feel safe. Her days were filled with ordinary things, helping her family with chores, running errands in the village, and learning from the elders. Her life was peaceful, predictable, and comforting, and she thought it would always stay that way. She had friends who laughed with her under the sun, neighbors who shared their stories, and a family whose love felt steady, like the slow-flowing river nearby. She believed that nothing could shake the foundation of her life. But life has a way of changing when you least expect it. One day, a distant conflict reached the outskirts of her village. It began slowly at first, rumors, whispers, and the occasional stranger passing by, warning of danger. The people tried to ignore it, hoping that their peaceful life would continue. But soon, the conflict grew closer. One morning, she woke up to find the streets strangely quiet, the usual sounds of children playing and women calling out for neighbors gone. Her heart felt heavy, sensing that something was wrong, but she could not yet understand the depth of the danger. By midday, the village was thrown into chaos. People ran in all directions, trying to protect themselves and their families. She was separated from her parents in the confusion. Fear gripped her, and she ran blindly through the streets, unsure of where she was going. Every step felt uncertain, and every sound made her jump. She had never known real fear before. Her heart pounded, and her hands trembled as she tried to find a safe place. She saw the smoke rising from some houses, heard cries of pain and panic, and realized that her life, the life she had known, had been disrupted in an instant. She ran until she could run no more, finally finding shelter behind a fallen cart at the edge of the village. There, she crouched in silence, tears streaming down her face, and tried to understand what had happened. She had no one to turn to, no guidance, and no idea how long she would have to hide. Her mind replayed the last moments of her family, and a painful emptiness grew inside her. Everything familiar, the sounds, the smells, the comforting routines of her home, had vanished. In that moment, she realized that she had entered a world that was completely unknown and possibly dangerous. Hours passed, and the chaos slowly faded, replaced by a heavy silence that seemed to swallow everything around her. When she finally dared to look up, she saw figures moving through the village, not the familiar villagers she had known, but strangers with different customs, strange clothes, and unfamiliar expressions. She did not know whether they were friends or foes. Every instinct screamed at her to stay hidden, to move quietly, and to be invisible. Hunger and exhaustion began to set in, but fear was stronger than any physical need. She could not eat, could not sleep, and could not think clearly. Her mind focused only on survival. It was then that she noticed one man among the strangers, different from the rest. He moved with purpose, not recklessly, and he seemed to have a calm authority about him. There was something in the way he looked at her, careful, assessing, but not cruel, that made her both wary and curious. She could not tell if he was dangerous or protective, but for the first time since the attack, she felt a tiny spark of hope that someone might help her navigate this frightening world. She watched him from her hiding place, studying his movements and trying to understand his intentions. The days that followed were a blur of fear, confusion, and cautious observation. She learned to move quietly, to avoid attention, and to survive on whatever scraps of food she could find. The man she had noticed occasionally appeared nearby, always watching but never approaching directly. She wondered why he did not simply take her somewhere safe or leave her alone. The uncertainty was maddening, and yet she began to notice small signs that he cared for her well-being. Sometimes she would find food left in a hidden spot or notice him quietly defending her from danger without her seeing. Slowly, a fragile understanding began to form between them, built not on words but on actions and observation. As the days turned into weeks, she began to learn the ways of this new world. The strangers who had come into her village were part of a larger community with strict rules and traditions. To survive, she had to observe carefully, respect their customs, and find her place among them. The man, whom she now thought of as a guide of sorts, helped her navigate this unfamiliar life. He did not force her, but he offered lessons and protection, allowing her to learn at her own pace. She discovered that survival in this world required more than just physical strength. It required patience, intelligence, and trust. Even as she adapted, there were moments when fear returned in waves. She remembered her family, her home, and the life that had been stolen from her. The pain of loss was sharp, and sometimes she felt as if it would consume her. But in those moments, she reminded herself of the small signs of care she had witnessed. The man had shown her that even in a harsh and unpredictable world, there were people capable of kindness and understanding. Slowly, she began to see that her survival depended not just on hiding from danger, but on forming bonds that could help her navigate life's uncertainty. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, she found herself sitting quietly near a fire, watching the flames dance. The man approached, not with authority or command, but simply to sit nearby. He did not speak at first. They shared a silent understanding. In that quiet moment, she realized that the path forward would not be easy, but it was possible. She did not yet know the lessons this world would teach her, but she understood that she was no longer entirely alone. There was a connection forming, subtle but important, that could guide her through the challenges ahead. By the end of that first month, she had begun to learn the rules of survival in this new life. She could move without drawing attention, gather food and resources, and protect herself in small ways. She also learned to read the people around her, understanding when to trust and when to be cautious. Most importantly, she began to see the man not as a threat, but as a source of guidance in an uncertain world. His words and actions, though limited, had taught her that survival was possible, and that even in the darkest times, small acts of care could provide hope. She still missed her family every day. She still longed for the home she had lost, but she was no longer entirely helpless. She had begun to understand that life was not just about the past or the pain of what had been lost. Life was about learning, adapting, and finding strength within herself to face challenges she had never imagined. The man and the world he represented became a part of her journey, not as captor or controller, but as a silent teacher guiding her toward resilience and understanding. As the first chapter of this new life closed, she realized that her survival depended on more than just hiding or enduring. It depended on courage, observation, and the willingness to trust, even cautiously, in a world that had seemed so frightening. She had learned that fear was natural, but it could be managed. She had learned that help could come from unexpected places. And she had learned that even when life takes everything away, the human spirit is capable of adapting, growing, and finding hope in the smallest gestures. By the end of those first weeks, she no longer saw herself as simply a victim of circumstance. She was a learner, an observer, and someone beginning to find a path forward. The world was vast, complex, and sometimes frightening, but it was also full of possibility. And though she did not yet understand the full meaning of the man's presence in her life, she sensed that he would play an important role in the journey ahead, a journey that would test her, teach her, and eventually show her the power of understanding, trust, and resilience. After the first month of hiding and learning, her life slowly began to take shape in the new environment. The man, who had once seemed like a distant and mysterious figure, started to appear in her daily routine more often. He never forced himself into her life, but his presence was noticeable, steady, and oddly comforting. She began to understand that his attention was not meant to scare or control her, but to guide her through the ways of his people. The lessons he offered were quiet and subtle, often through observation rather than spoken words. He showed her how to read the signs in nature, how to spot which plants were safe to eat, where water could be found, and how to move quietly without drawing attention. Each day brought new challenges and with them, small victories. She discovered that she could navigate the forest without fear, moving as silently as a shadow. She learned to recognize the sounds of birds, the rustle of animals, and even the distant noises that signaled danger. Each skill she mastered gave her a small sense of control over her surroundings, and with that control came confidence. But the journey was not easy. There were moments of frustration when she failed, when her hands trembled from exhaustion, or when hunger gnawed at her. Yet every failure was a lesson. Every misstep taught her something important about patience, observation, and resilience. The man began to share small pieces of wisdom with her. Not direct orders or commands, but advice about life, survival, and the ways people could live together peacefully. He taught her that respect and understanding were more powerful than fear or force. She realized that he had lived through hardships himself, and that his actions were shaped by his experiences. In time, she started to understand that his world, though very different from hers, had its own logic, rules, and traditions. She had to learn them to survive, and in learning them, she began to grow stronger. One afternoon, as they moved quietly through the forest, he stopped and gestured for her to pay attention. He pointed to a group of birds flying low over the trees. "Notice how they move," he said simply, his voice calm. "They are aware of everything around them. You must learn the same." She watched carefully, noting how the birds responded to danger, how they shifted their flight patterns, and how they stayed close to each other. That moment, simple as it seemed, was a lesson in awareness. It taught her that survival depended not only on strength but also on understanding and anticipation. At night, when the campfires glowed softly against the dark forest, she would sit quietly, reflecting on the day. She often thought of her family, wondering if they had survived, if they were thinking of her, and if they missed her as much as she missed them. The pain of separation was sharp, and she sometimes cried silently into her hands. Yet even in those moments of sorrow, she felt a spark of determination. She knew that dwelling only on what she had lost would not help her. She needed to adapt, to learn, and to find ways to navigate this strange and sometimes frightening world. As the days went on, she noticed that the man's presence brought more than guidance, it brought safety. On several occasions, she saw him intervene quietly when danger approached. Sometimes it was a wild animal that might have attacked her. Other times it was a stranger whose intentions were unclear. He never boasted about his actions or demanded recognition. He acted silently and efficiently, showing her that protection could be given without expectation or control. Slowly, she began to trust him, realizing that his intentions were good. But trust was not simple. It was built slowly, brick by brick, through consistent care, patience, and understanding. One morning, as they walked to collect water from a nearby stream, she slipped on a mossy rock and nearly fell. The man caught her gently, steadying her with his hands. "Be careful," he said, and there was no anger in his voice, only concern. That simple moment made her heart race, not from fear, but from recognition that someone cared about her well-being. It was a feeling she had not experienced since the attack on her village, and it was both comforting and strange. For the first time, she felt that perhaps her life could have moments of peace again, even in such uncertainty. Life in the camp was not without tension. The community had its rules, and newcomers were often watched closely. She observed the others carefully, learning who could be trusted and who required caution. Some treated her with kindness, while others remained distant or suspicious. She realized that building relationships was as important as learning survival skills. Every interaction became a lesson in human nature, how people reacted to fear, how they protected each other, and how alliances were formed. Through observation, she began to understand the complex social dynamics of this new life. Her days became a mix of learning and testing herself. She practiced the skills the man taught her, climbing trees to see the surroundings, identifying edible plants, tracking animals, and moving without leaving a trace. Each skill strengthened her body and mind, giving her confidence that she could face challenges alone if necessary. But the man's guidance reminded her that survival was not only about physical skill, it was also about patience, perception, and understanding human behavior. He often said, "Strength alone will not keep you safe. Awareness and calm will." Over time, she began to see the truth in his words. Despite her growing skills and understanding, fear never disappeared entirely. There were moments when memories of the attack haunted her, the screams, the chaos, the feeling of being utterly helpless. At those times, she would sit quietly, breathing deeply, and remember the lessons she had learned, to watch, to wait, and to act only when necessary. Slowly, fear became less of a paralyzing force and more of a guide, helping her to pay attention, to remain alert, and to respect the dangers around her. She realized that fear, when understood and managed, could be an ally rather than an enemy. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, she and the man sat by the fire. Silence stretched between them, but it was comfortable, not awkward. He handed her a small piece of food, and she accepted it without words. In that quiet moment, she felt a connection, not just to him, but to the idea that life could continue, that trust could be built slowly, and that survival was possible even in a harsh world. She understood that their relationship was not one of power and control, but of guidance, protection, and shared understanding. She also began to notice small signs of humanity in others around the camp. Some showed kindness without expectation, others shared resources without hesitation, and a few simply offered a smile or a nod. These small acts reminded her that even in the midst of loss and fear, people were capable of compassion. She learned to look for these signs, to appreciate them, and to allow them to give her hope. Slowly, hope replaced some of the despair she had carried since the attack on her village. By the end of her second month in this new life, she had changed in ways she had never imagined. She was no longer the frightened, helpless girl who had hidden behind a cart in her village. She had grown stronger, more aware, and more capable of navigating the challenges around her. She had learned to trust cautiously, to observe carefully, and to act wisely. She had learned that survival was not only about escaping danger, but also about understanding the world and the people in it. Even as she adapted and grew, she knew that the journey ahead would be difficult. There were still threats she could not foresee, challenges she had not yet faced, and emotions she had not yet reconciled. But she also knew that she was not entirely alone. The man, with his quiet guidance and protective presence, had become a source of strength. He did not control her, but he helped her see that life could continue, even after tragedy. And in that realization, she began to find not only survival, but also a fragile sense of hope, a hope that would guide her through the coming days and the lessons still to come. As the weeks turned into months, she began to feel that the world around her was becoming a little less frightening. She had learned to recognize patterns in nature, to move silently through the forest, and to understand the routines of the people around her. Yet, with every small success came new challenges that tested not only her skills but also her spirit. The man who had guided her remained a constant presence, observing quietly, offering advice, and sometimes simply being near when danger approached. His patience and calmness became something she relied on more than she realized. Life in the camp was a mixture of order and unpredictability. Each day followed certain routines, yet unexpected events could disrupt even the most careful plans. Sometimes, storms would roll in suddenly, making travel dangerous and shelter essential. Other times, animals would wander close to the camp, forcing her to use all her skills to remain unseen. She had grown stronger physically, learning to climb trees, navigate rocky terrain, and forage for food. But her mind also had to grow sharper. She realized that every decision she made had consequences, and that even small mistakes could have serious results. One morning, the man approached her with a different kind of lesson. Instead of showing her how to survive in the forest, he wanted her to understand people, how they thought, how they reacted, and how they made decisions. He explained that the human world was just as complex as nature, and that understanding emotions, intentions, and motives was essential for survival. At first, she found this confusing. People were unpredictable, and she had learned to trust her instincts above all else. But gradually, she began to notice patterns, how people behaved under pressure, how kindness could build loyalty, and how fear could cloud judgment. These lessons, she realized, were just as important as any skills she had learned in the wild. As she practiced these lessons, she began to interact more with others in the community. It was not easy. Many of them were wary of her, unsure of her place among them. Some were openly friendly, offering advice or sharing food, while others remained distant or even suspicious. She learned to approach each interaction carefully, reading faces, listening to tone, and observing body language. With time, she discovered that small gestures could create trust, a smile, a nod, or a quiet word of encouragement. She started to see that people responded to patience and understanding, and that relationships could be built slowly but steadily. Even with these growing skills, she faced moments of doubt. She often wondered if she would ever feel safe, or if she would ever truly belong in this world that had once seemed so alien. Memories of her village and family returned in waves, bringing both sadness and longing. But in these moments, she reminded herself of the lessons she had learned. That survival was about resilience, that understanding others was as important as understanding the land, and that hope could be found even in small acts of kindness. She began to realize that her life, though forever changed, could still have meaning and purpose. One afternoon, as she and the man traveled to gather food from a distant area, they encountered a small challenge that tested both her skills and her judgment. A river that was usually shallow had risen after a storm, making the crossing dangerous. She paused, uncertain of how to proceed. The man did not rush her or offer instructions immediately. Instead, he encouraged her to think, to observe, and to find her own solution. After a few moments of careful consideration, she found a safer path across, using rocks as stepping stones and balancing carefully with a sturdy branch. The sense of accomplishment she felt was profound. She realized that the lessons she had learned were not just about survival. They were about trust in herself and in her abilities. In the days that followed, she continued to face small but important challenges. She learned to navigate difficult terrain, to identify edible plants and avoid harmful ones, and to observe the habits of animals in order to stay safe. Each success, no matter how minor, strengthened her confidence. Yet she also recognized the limits of her knowledge. There were still dangers she could not predict, still skills she had not mastered, and still uncertainties that filled her with caution. But instead of feeling defeated, she used these challenges as motivation to continue learning and growing. Her relationship with the man deepened during this period. He remained quiet and patient, never forcing her to act, but always ready to support her when needed. She began to understand that his presence was not about control, but about guidance. He taught her that the world could be harsh, but that careful observation, respect, and patience could make it navigable. Slowly, she began to see him not as a mysterious or distant figure, but as a mentor whose wisdom had helped her survive and adapt. His quiet strength became something she could rely on, and his presence gave her a sense of security she had not felt in a long time. Despite this growing stability, she faced emotional challenges that were harder to overcome than any physical obstacle. Memories of the attack on her village haunted her dreams. She would wake in the middle of the night, heart racing, unable to escape the images of chaos and loss. But she learned to cope by focusing on the present, using the skills and lessons she had learned to ground herself. She practiced deep breathing, observed the environment carefully, and reminded herself of the progress she had made. These moments, though painful, became opportunities for growth, teaching her resilience and mental strength. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, she reflected on how far she had come. She could move confidently through the forest, interact carefully with the people in the camp, and trust her instincts in ways she could not have imagined a few months earlier. Yet, she also realized that this journey was far from over. There were still lessons to learn, challenges to face, and fears to confront. She understood that life in this new world required constant adaptation, and that true strength came not from avoiding difficulties, but from facing them with courage and wisdom. In addition to survival skills, she also began to develop a deeper understanding of compassion and empathy. She saw how the man treated others with respect and patience, even when they made mistakes. She noticed how small acts of kindness could ripple through the community, creating trust and cooperation. These observations helped her understand that survival was not just about physical strength or cunning. It was also about relationships, understanding, and the ability to navigate human emotions. She began to practice these lessons herself, offering help when she could, listening carefully and observing without judgment. By the end of this period, she had grown in ways that surprised her. She was no longer the frightened, helpless girl who had fled her village. She was capable, observant, and increasingly confident in her ability to navigate both the natural and human world. She had learned that fear could be managed, that trust could be built slowly, and that even in difficult circumstances, hope could exist. Her relationship with the man had become a source of guidance and stability, helping her to understand that life could continue, even after tragedy. Yet, even with all these lessons, she knew that challenges were not over. There would be moments when fear, doubt, or danger would return. There would be situations that tested her skills, judgment, and emotional strength. But she also knew that she had grown stronger, more aware, and more resilient. She had learned to observe, to think carefully, to act with patience, and to trust her instincts. She had discovered that survival was not just about avoiding danger. It was about understanding the world, learning from experience, and finding strength within herself. And so, as she looked toward the future, she felt a quiet determination. She knew that life would continue to test her, but she also knew that she was capable of meeting those challenges. She had learned the importance of observation, patience, and understanding, and she had discovered the quiet power of guidance, trust, and hope. In the months ahead, these lessons would continue to shape her journey, helping her navigate not only the dangers of the world but also the complexities of human relationships. Months had passed since she first arrived in the unfamiliar world that had once seemed so frightening. She had learned to navigate the forest, understand the people around her, and manage her own fears. Yet, despite all the skills and knowledge she had gained, nothing could fully prepare her for the moment when the world would test her in ways she had never imagined. Life, she realized, had a way of presenting challenges that demanded more than strength or intelligence. It demanded courage, adaptability, and inner resilience. It began one early morning when the camp stirred to life with the usual sounds of preparation. People were gathering food, tending to tasks, and moving carefully through the area as they always did. She had risen with the sun, performing her own duties quietly, when she noticed a group of strangers approaching from the distant hills. Their arrival was sudden, and their presence immediately filled the camp with tension. Everyone stopped their work, eyes narrowing, observing the newcomers with caution. She felt her heart race, not just from fear, but from the sudden realization that the world she had grown accustomed to could be disrupted in an instant. The man who had guided her appeared quickly by her side. His calm presence, which had always been a source of comfort, now carried a different weight. He assessed the situation silently, his eyes sharp, taking in every detail of the approaching group. She watched him, trying to understand what was happening, sensing that this was more serious than anything they had faced before. The newcomers did not speak immediately. Their expressions were guarded and their movements careful. It was clear that they were unfamiliar with the camp and its rules, and that their intentions were uncertain. As the strangers moved closer, murmurs spread through the camp. Some of the people began whispering to one another, debating how to respond. Fear and uncertainty rippled through the community. She felt a tight knot in her stomach, a reminder that danger could arrive even after months of relative stability. Yet, she also felt a sense of preparedness she had never known before. She understood the importance of observation, of patience, and of careful action. She had learned to wait, to watch, and to act only when necessary. These skills, honed over months of learning, suddenly became crucial. The man finally spoke, his voice calm but firm. "Stay close to me," he said. "Watch and learn." His words were simple, but they carried reassurance and guidance. She moved beside him, following his lead, and felt a mix of fear and determination. She realized that this moment was not only a test of her survival skills, but also of her judgment and composure. Every movement, every decision, could have consequences for herself and for the community she had come to care about. The strangers eventually stopped at the edge of the camp. One of them stepped forward cautiously and raised a hand in greeting. The man responded, his body language calm but assertive. A conversation began, measured and deliberate. She listened carefully, picking up on the tone, the pauses, and the unspoken messages. The situation was tense. Misunderstandings could escalate quickly. She observed the dynamics closely, remembering the lessons she had learned about human behavior. Patience, awareness, and respect were essential, not just for survival but for avoiding conflict. Despite the careful negotiation, tension remained high. The strangers seemed uncertain, perhaps even suspicious, while the camp residents remained wary. She noticed subtle gestures, hands gripping tools, eyes scanning the surroundings, and small movements that revealed unease. It became clear that this encounter could either pass peacefully or escalate into conflict. Her heart pounded as she realized the stakes. Months of preparation and learning would now be tested in a real, high-stakes situation. The man, ever vigilant, made a decision. He stepped forward, speaking in a clear voice that carried both authority and calm. He explained the rules of the camp, the expectations for behavior, and the consequences of breaking those rules. He emphasized respect, cooperation, and the importance of understanding the community's way of life. His words were firm but fair, and the strangers listened attentively. She watched closely, noting how his calm confidence diffused tension, and how clarity and communication could prevent misunderstandings from turning into danger. For hours, the situation remained tense but manageable. The strangers settled at the edge of the camp, observing carefully, while the residents continued their routines with caution. She moved through the camp alongside the man, helping where she could and learning from his example. She noticed how he balanced firmness with compassion, how he set boundaries without hostility, and how he maintained control without aggression. These observations deepened her understanding of leadership, trust, and responsibility. As the day progressed, a sudden event tested her newly acquired skills. A wild animal, startled by the presence of the strangers, charged into the camp, causing chaos and panic. People shouted and some froze in fear. Her heart raced, but she remembered the lessons she had learned. Stay calm, observe carefully, and act decisively. She moved quickly, helping to guide others out of the animal's path, using the techniques the man had taught her to remain safe. Her actions were measured and purposeful, and for the first time, She felt a deep sense of confidence in her ability to respond to real danger. The man joined her, coordinating with the others to ensure everyone's safety. Together, they managed to calm the situation, guiding the animal away without harm. The camp breathed a collective sigh of relief. She realized in that moment that her growth was not just about physical skill or survival tactics. It was about courage, composure, and the ability to respond effectively under pressure. She had faced fear directly and emerged stronger, more capable, and more self-assured. As evening approached, the tension in the camp slowly eased. The strangers had remained, but the immediate danger had passed. The man gathered the residents and addressed the day's events, praising courage and cooperation, while also reinforcing the importance of vigilance and awareness. She listened carefully, understanding that leadership was not about dominance, but about guiding others, teaching and inspiring confidence. She felt a new sense of purpose. She wanted to continue learning, not just for her own survival, but to contribute to the safety and well-being of the community. That night, she reflected on the events of the day. She thought about the arrival of the strangers, the panic caused by the wild animal, and her own reactions. She realized that she had changed profoundly since the day she first arrived in this world. She was no longer a frightened, helpless girl. She had become observant, capable, and resilient. She had learned to face fear, to make decisions under pressure, and to trust both her instincts and her judgment. The man had guided her, but she had also discovered her own inner strength. As she sat quietly near the fire, the man approached and spoke softly. "You did well today," he said. "You faced danger and fear without losing control. That is rare and valuable." She felt a sense of pride, not arrogance, but quiet confidence. She understood that survival was not just about physical skill, but about mental strength, patience, and understanding the world and the people around her. His words reinforced the lessons she had learned through experience, observation, and careful action. Over the next few days, the camp settled into a new rhythm. The strangers became a part of the environment, not fully integrated but tolerated. The experience had changed the dynamics of the community, making everyone more cautious and aware. She continued to practice her skills, observe human behavior, and learn from the man's guidance. Each day brought new lessons, reinforcing the understanding that life was unpredictable, that danger could appear suddenly, and that preparedness, patience, and composure were essential. By the end of this period, she felt a profound shift within herself. The events of the day, the arrival of strangers, the chaos caused by the wild animal and her own responses, had shown her the depth of her resilience and the power of courage. She realized that life's challenges would continue to come, but that she was now capable of facing them. She had grown in ways that went beyond survival skills. She had developed confidence, judgment, and the ability to navigate uncertainty. She also understood the importance of community and guidance. The man's quiet presence, steady advice, and careful teaching had prepared her to respond effectively when real danger appeared. She recognized that trust, patience, and respect were as important as courage and skill. The experience had taught her that life's most significant challenges often came unexpectedly, and that true strength was measured not only by survival, but by composure, understanding, and the ability to act with clarity under pressure. As she lay down to rest that night, she felt a deep sense of accomplishment. She had faced fear directly, navigated complex social dynamics, and acted decisively in a moment of crisis. She had proven to herself that she was capable, resilient, and ready to face whatever challenges the future might bring. And though she knew that more tests awaited, she also knew that she had the strength, knowledge, and courage to meet them. After the chaos had passed, life in the camp slowly returned to a more predictable rhythm. The tension from the arrival of the strangers and the wild animal had faded, but the lessons she had learned remained vivid in her mind. She had discovered strength she had never known, courage she had not realized she possessed, and a sense of awareness that kept her safe in ways she had never imagined. She now understood that life would always bring challenges, some sudden and frightening, but that she could face them with calmness, thoughtfulness, and determination. The man who had guided her continued to be a quiet presence in her life, but now she no longer needed him in the same way she once had. She could move through the forest alone, make decisions with confidence, and assess situations carefully. He still offered advice when necessary, but she felt a sense of independence that had grown steadily over the months. This independence did not come from recklessness, but from careful observation, practice, and the experiences that had shaped her. She realized that she had become capable of taking care of herself, even in a world that had once seemed dangerous and unpredictable. She also began to notice changes in how the community treated her. People who had once been wary now showed signs of respect and trust. They recognized her skills, her composure, and her ability to act wisely under pressure. Small acts of acknowledgement, a nod, a smile, or a word of thanks, reminded her that she was no longer an outsider struggling to survive. She was now a valued member of the group, someone who had proven herself through action, patience, and perseverance. The realization filled her with a quiet sense of pride and belonging. Despite her growing confidence, she never forgot the family and village she had lost. Memories of her past continued to surface, sometimes unexpectedly, reminding her of the life she had once known. The sadness was still there, but it no longer felt overwhelming. Instead, it became a source of motivation, a reminder that she had survived, adapted, and grown stronger. She learned to carry her memories without letting them dominate her, using them to guide her choices and to appreciate the life she had now. The past and the present existed together, shaping her into someone wiser, more resilient, and more compassionate. One morning, she decided to explore a part of the forest she had never visited. She wanted to test her skills, to challenge herself, and to see how much she had grown. Moving carefully and observing everything around her, she felt a sense of freedom she had never known before. She climbed hills, crossed streams, and navigated dense foliage, remembering all the lessons the man had taught her about awareness, patience, and careful action. With each step, she felt more confident, more capable, and more alive. The forest, which had once seemed intimidating and dangerous, now felt like a place of possibility and discovery. As she ventured deeper into the forest, she encountered signs of life and movement, birds singing, animals rustling, and trees swaying gently in the wind. She felt a profound connection with the natural world, realizing that understanding and respect had made her not just a survivor, but someone who could truly live in harmony with her surroundings. She remembered the first days when fear had consumed her, and she marveled at how much she had changed. Fear still existed, but it was no longer paralyzing. It had become a guide, helping her to remain aware, cautious, and attentive. Returning to the camp later that day, she noticed the man watching her from a distance. He smiled, a rare and gentle expression, and she understood that he was proud, not just of her survival but of her growth. She realized that his role in her life had been not to control or dominate, but to teach, guide, and help her discover her own strength. She approached him, and for the first time their relationship felt completely balanced. There was mutual respect, understanding, and quiet trust. She no longer relied on him out of fear or necessity. She relied on him out of acknowledgement for the wisdom he had shared and the support he had provided. Life in the camp continued, but her perspective had shifted. She noticed details she had once overlooked. The way the wind carried scents through the trees, the subtle sounds of creatures moving quietly, the small gestures of kindness among the people. She began to take a more active role in helping others, sharing her knowledge and assisting those who were learning to navigate the world around them. She realized that survival was not just about herself, but also about contributing to the well-being of others. Through teaching and helping, she found a sense of purpose and fulfillment she had not known before. One day, a group of young members of the community asked her to teach them some of the skills she had learned. At first, she hesitated, unsure if she was ready to lead or share her knowledge. But then she remembered the guidance she had received, the lessons in patience, observation, and careful action. She began to demonstrate how to move quietly through the forest, how to identify safe plants, and how to remain alert to danger. Watching the young members follow her instructions, she felt a deep sense of satisfaction. She realized that teaching others was another way of ensuring survival, not just for herself, but for the community as a whole. Over time, she began to feel a sense of belonging that she had never thought possible when she first arrived. The camp, which had once been a place of uncertainty and fear, had become a home of sorts. She had friends who trusted her, mentors who respected her, and a community that valued her skills and insight. She also carried the quiet presence of the man who had guided her, understanding that while she had grown strong, the lessons he had shared would always be a part of her life. Their relationship had evolved into one of mutual respect, quiet friendship, and shared understanding, a bond built on trust, guidance, and shared experience. Reflecting on the journey she had taken, she recognized that every challenge, every moment of fear, and every lesson had shaped her into a stronger, wiser person. She no longer saw herself as a victim of circumstance, but as someone capable of shaping her own life. The memories of her family and village remained, but they no longer held her captive. Instead, they became part of a larger story, a story of survival, resilience, growth, and hope. She understood that life would continue to bring challenges, but she was ready to face them with courage, clarity, and determination. As the seasons changed, she found joy in small moments. A clear stream, the laughter of friends, the warmth of the sun on her face, and the quiet satisfaction of mastering new skills. These moments reminded her that life could be beautiful, even after hardship, and that the human spirit was capable of resilience, growth, and adaptation. She learned to appreciate the present while honoring the past, finding balance in her emotions and strength in her experiences. By the end of her first year in the camp, she had transformed completely. She was no longer the frightened girl who had hidden behind a cart in her village. She was confident, capable, and resilient. She had learned to survive, to thrive, and to find meaning in a world that had once seemed overwhelming. The man who had guided her remained a trusted figure, but she had become independent, capable of making her own decisions and navigating life with wisdom and composure. In the quiet moments, she often thought about the journey she had taken. The hardships, the fears, the lessons, and the growth, they were all part of a story that belonged to her. She had discovered that true strength came not from avoiding challenges, but from facing them with courage and determination. She had learned that survival was about more than physical skill. It was about understanding, patience, compassion, and the ability to navigate both the natural and human world. As she looked toward the future, she felt hope. She knew that life would continue to bring challenges, but she also knew that she was ready. She carried the wisdom of her experiences, the skills she had learned, and the lessons of trust and understanding she had discovered. She understood that even in a world that could be harsh and unpredictable, there was beauty, connection, and opportunity for growth. She was prepared to face whatever came next, not with fear, but with confidence, courage, and hope. And so the story of her journey came full circle. From the chaos of her past to the challenges of the present, she had grown into someone strong, resilient, and capable. She had learned to survive, to trust, and to find meaning in a world that had once seemed impossible. And though her path had been shaped by hardship, it was also shaped by growth, understanding, and the quiet power of human resilience. She had faced fear, learned from it, and emerged stronger. And now, with hope and confidence, she was ready to continue her journey, embracing life with courage, wisdom, and the knowledge that she could overcome anything that came her way.